If you just joined us, this is our coverage of the final funeral service of the late former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan. It's been a pretty solemn and emotional moment as family, friends talk about how good a man he was and the values that he lived by. But it's also interesting to note that even until his death, Mr. Annan was working to ensure peace and security in the world. He had recently been to Zimbabwe and working with his Kofi Annan Foundation. He had been to a lot of places and was really working hard. You want to call him one who actually never retired and kept working until the very end. We're just going to show you a video that outlines the last 12 months of his life so you see why many in the world are celebrating this man, Kofi Annan. A really beautiful compilation of the last 12 months of Kofi Annan's life put together by his foundation. You're watching the Joy News channel, and I'm Bernice Abulbedu. We'll bring you live visuals from the cemetery now, even as prepare to receive the cortege and undertake that private burial service for the late former UN Secretary General. Mama V Usopwaji, my colleague, has joined me in the studio. Mama V, earlier you were at the Accra International Conference Center, so you had a first-hand, if I may want to call it, feel of what was happening there. But watching from the studios, really solemn occasion.
Yeah, it has been. But you know, usually at a time like this, you'd find people crying. I think it's been like a celebration, really. And for us here at Joy News, we said, it's a celebration of a global icon, and I think that's the reflection of that is what you feel, even back at the Accra International Conference Center. Of course, we feel the loss. You see the sense of people really realizing that Kofi Annan is no longer with us, but just the joy of what he had done, what he represented. And I think that would stay with all of us for a very long time to come.
It's good that you mentioned staying with us, because as I have been saying, his son believes, Kojo Annan, that the best way to pay tribute to his dad will be to continue in his work and continue his footsteps. And we were discussing earlier, Mama V, that Kofi Annan never seemed to have retired.
No.
From what we just saw, he was working till the last minute.
Yeah.
Hard worker he was. And his goal was to achieve peace and security. And we've been speaking to a lot of people who have had the time to come and pay their last respects, and they've been sharing really wonderful things about him.
Absolutely. We had Barack Obama describe him as a man who pursued a better world. We've had people describe him as somebody who represented what we knew him for on the outside. And I think it's incredible for somebody to pass and for every single person to say something. Peace, it's almost like it's in his middle name. He represented and he lived it as well. And I think that is incredible, that we're learning a lot more than, and he's not just a Ghanaian. I think today we've realized it so much.
A gift to the world.
Yeah,
he's been described by some people. But you had the opportunity to meet him personally.
I did.
Would you mind sharing with us?
My one-time opportunity, except that finally when I was told I could ask him whatever it is I wanted to ask him.
You were starstruck.
I couldn't speak.
I mean, I think that's what people have also said about his demeanor. He seemed to have this charisma, this sort of loving energy around him that made him very homey. Even if you didn't know him, it looked like you could approach him or say anything you wanted to him. And you also spoke to his wife when you met him that day.
I had a chat with her on her projects, and they've always, from what I hear and the little that I know, always moved together and done a lot of work together. So this meeting was his last visit, if you like, to Ghana, where he donated some personal paintings to an art gallery. And this was in the name of Infantipim, his old school. And you know, they've been really involved in his work. And each time he's been here, they've had something to do with his visit. And yes, and when I went, I was like, I want to ask Kofi Annan a question. I have something to ask him. And they said, no questions. He's only, chatting. Is almost like a one-on-one kind of event.
Informal.
And then finally they said, okay, all media people gather. Mr. Annan would give a speech. And then in the middle of it, they said, oh, where's the young lady who wanted to ask me a question so badly? And there I was, couldn't ask a thing. But I think that Reverend Akrofi appropriately mentioned his wife and thanked her. And that's something that is usually missing. But she's been there. She's been there.
And he did also mention the fact that he was a man who lived by the values of humility, humanity, honesty, and the last one, humor. I mean, you can't take that away from him. He seemed to have that element of making people smile or laugh with something he said. And the famous one has to definitely be that one.
Cave Freeman.
You know, that one where he mentioned, Mama V, it may be a difficult question to ask at this time, but I think for many people who are grieving his loss, the question is that, can we find another person like Kofi Annan? Can we find in another Ghanaian, another African, this personality, this beautiful soul, if it is, we may say. And it's something that's lingering on the minds of many people. He definitely was a great man by all standards.
Yeah.
I mean, watching him from afar, you will just love him.
I think that there will always be only one Kofi Annan.
I love that.
There won't be anybody like him, but of course we would see people who would have learnt a lot from him.
Yeah.
And I think that we will see there are people actually who are doing different things in different areas, except that he came into the spotlight the way that he did, doing very incredible things with the rest of the world watching. And he's carried our name Ghana very high. I asked the question today, how are we taking advantage of
The attention.
Exactly, and the fact that we have so many people who are in Ghana today who have never even been here before, who would never have come here
But for him.
exactly. So, you know, we have people doing other things, but Kofi Annan was one of a kind. Yeah.
And I think, like you mentioned, it would be good to use what he's done as a launch pad, so to speak, that we must aspire to do more and to do higher and to achieve that world that he wanted to achieve. So, Mama V, like we said, Kofi Annan never stopped working until he fell ill for a short while and passed on after that. But he had a vision for the world. He was working hard to create a certain world, and we are being told that through his foundation, those values and that vision will live on. But I want to show you a video of Kofi Annan himself sharing with us his vision for the world, and hopefully we could all embrace that vision even as he's passed on. Hopefully watching down on us, he can appreciate that we are carrying that vision and bringing it to reality. Take a look at it.
That I'm working to create is a world that should be of interest to all of us. I'm working to create a world that is stable, that is peaceful, where we as human beings realize that we cannot consume the resources of the world the way we are doing, as if there's no tomorrow. It's going to be a disaster for our children and our grandchildren. The farmer knows instinctively that if you take something from the earth today, you have to put something back to be able to return to harvest tomorrow. Somehow, when we move to the city, we lose that instinct. We need to create a world that is equitable, that is stable, and a world where we bear in mind the needs of others and not only what we need immediately.
We'll bring you more about Kofi Annan's vision for the world, but now we have to take you to the new military cemetery at the Burma camp here in Accra, and you can see the dignitaries arriving for that burial service. We've been told will be private, and the cortege hasn't arrived yet, but we can see the dignitaries then their numbers hopefully will commence anytime soon. But Mama V, we are being told that this was Kofi Annan's wish. He really wanted something not too extravagant. It tells you who he is at heart.
Yes, and we know that because of the state. So what we're giving him is a 17 gun salute. That's just a little below what the president would get, and this is above the vice president. And again, it tells you how big, you know, he is and how we've recognized him even as a nation. But we know that he had some personal wishes as well, and the family as well. But they've had to compromise a little bit.
Find a balance.
Because, of course, he is our own. Everybody's Kofi Annan. But what we will see at the cemetery, we would witness a bit of the ceremony.
Yes.
A little bit of it, and then afterwards, the rest will be strictly private. Yes. So there will be, something will happen here, what you're watching, the president, you know, a little function. We'll see the president speak, I think, and then afterwards it will be goodbye to the rest of the world.
It's always difficult to say goodbye, Mama V, and like we heard him when he was ending his term, or when he ended his term as UN Secretary General, he did mention that saying goodbye is not easy. But I think this goodbye is worse than that goodbye, because then at least we still had him around. People could go back to him, you know, if you needed some advice, like President Akufo-Addo said, he received some advice when he became president. But now this goodbye, Mama V, it's a very hard one to take. Yes. And like I said, there were a few tears. I saw Antonio Guterres, you know, just trying to, you know, control himself there. And then there were teary eyes. And it tells you that this is indeed a great loss, Mama V. I mean, we can't overemphasize it. He was one of a kind. And like some have said, he was a gem. Yeah.
I think his death has been really personal to some people that we didn't think, you know, you would not recognize them necessarily as family. You mentioned Antonio Guterres, and he said it. This is personal to him as well. Who would have thought? There are people who were really close to him. And because he was private, I mean, he was a public figure, did a lot of public things, but beneath that, he was also very private, really private. And we see that in this. I remember you know, some information that was shared that he didn't want anything flamboyant. So we see that even at the conference center, there's not so much, at least what we saw, not so much decoration. Everything was a bit toned down. And that's what he would have loved.
Exactly. And it's just good to see how we honor him as a people with at least sticking to his wishes. And his role in Ghana, or even Ghanaian politics, like you said, he was public but private, and I want to believe that there were times when he may have stepped in a bit into the political arena. I remember the 2016 elections when there was a bit of uneasiness about the declaration of the election. I remember here we read a tweet from Kofi Annan asking all to be calm and all to accept the result. He wasn't deeply involved, at least publicly, in our politics, but you could say that when he spoke, hearts were at ease. People listened, you know. And I think Antonio Guterres described it perfectly. He said when he spoke, we all leaned in. You know, it's almost like you can't miss this. Kofi Annan is speaking, and a beautiful soul by all standards.
You know, he had been asked to intercede in crisis, remember, sometimes as an impartial, independent mediator, sometimes as a special envoy of the international community. And in recent years, he's provided such counsel to Burkina Faso, to Kenya, to Myanmar, Senegal, Syria, Iraq, and Colombia. He's also participated in problem-solving missions for the elders and other organizations that he's been a part of. So he left it even when he wasn't in office with the United Nations, and he wanted to take a break, but he couldn't really. He was in Zimbabwe, he was in South Africa before we were told he fell ill, that illness that he never really recovered from. Reason we're here today.
Well, Mama V, it's now time to bring you some headlines, other headlines making rounds in the country and elsewhere, and Daniel Dazi will be doing that. We'll take you back to the cemetery shortly when the final burial service for the late Kofi Annan takes place.